I don't really quite know exactly how this next script is going to end up being, but nothing much I can really do. And I suppose, as the title states, maybe the presumed pressure will help in some regard. I'm not really sure about that. Oh, well, let's see. As I often like to do at the start and or end, here is a little, let's say, behind the scenes information on about the nature of these upcoming videos. About the nature of these upcoming videos. I suppose it's no surprise, but I once again. Let's see. I suppose it should be. I suppose it should be no surprise. But I once again originally intended to only make one or two videos about my chosen subject. However, after getting a taste of how much information there actually was, after getting a taste of how much information there actually was about the Slaughterhouse 9, I decided that a series of videos about the various lineups they've had over the years, plus one about miscellaneous, let's say, add-ons they've had, would be a better way to organize all of said information. Anyway, regardless of all of that, beginning with the general who and what, as it were, beginning with the general who and what, as it were. First, in terms of the basics, anyway, regardless of all of that, beginning with the general who and what, as it were. First, in terms of the basics, they were an S-class threat. They were an S-class rated roving band. In terms of the basics, they were an S-class rated wandering group. A wandering group of 9 supervillains based in North America. Second, for a variety of reasons, often death, there were not always 9 members present within said group. Neither were they always the same exact 9 members. Though, as an extension of that, while the max number of quote-unquote official members was, well, 9, later in its lifespan, they did have some, let's call them, secondary powered members who are... They did have some, let's call them, secondary powered members, who I will elaborate on in a later. Who will be elaborated on in Paris. Who will be elaborated on in a later video. Finally, their modus operandi, their MO, plainly put, was to cause chaos and havoc wherever they went. Now, for this part on how they recruited members, I wanted to... Now, for this part on how they recruited members, on how they Now, for this part on how they recruited members, I want to mention that the following recruitment process, I will mention that the following recruitment process likely came into fruition after Jack Slash took over. Since, from my understanding, King, the original leader, recruited with a stronger reliance on his power specifically. More on that later. Anyway, while I doubt the Nine had a definitive procedure for recruitment, given changing circumstances and moods, and well, the creator, given changing circumstances and moods, and well, the chaotic nature of the Nine themselves, the following is a general way the Nine seemed to have recruited based on what we see within the story. First, each of the Nine nominated someone they would like to initiate into the group. Though, to reference my doubt about them not having concrete recruitment methods, it is possible for someone to confront the Nine and nominate themselves, if one so desired, for whatever reason. Second, each member can choose to visit or alternatively observe their chosen target before quote-unquote formal recruitment begins. Finally, after an indeterminate amount of time, each of the Nine individually tests every nominated individual. Some members always gave the same general test, and others mixed it up every time. Some members may even forgo a test altogether, but from what I could find, that was a relatively what can I say that? That was a relatively rare occurrence. Interestingly, the recruits did not need to pass every test to move on to the next test. In fact, Jack himself stated that no one had ever passed all of them. Evidently, even with that in mind, depending on which test it was, failure still carried with it a high potential of death or worse. So, at the end of the day, it is still in the best interest of the nominees to strive to succeed. Right. Before I move on to the Cape content, I have a few more things to mention. First of all, if more than one candidate manages to survive until the end, the Nine forced them to fight to the death to determine the ultimate winner. Second, from what I was able to gather, it seems as though when the Nine were more in a rush and or desperate for members, they may have been a bit laxer when it came to recruitment. Perhaps they gave abridged versions of their tests, or perhaps they saved their tests for later. Evidently, those speculations are just that, speculation. Certainly, given what we do know, we can make informed guesses all we want on what they would potentially do, but given what I said earlier, those guesses are based on the recruitment process that was possibly just one variation of many. One variant of many? So those guesses are based on the recruitment process that was possibly just one of many. Just one of many? But to get back on topic, the most prominent example we do have of them quickly recruiting members was vague on the details. We'll get back on topic. The most prominent example we do have of them quickly recruiting members was vague on the details. We don't know how long each recruitment took, nor how long it was between each recruitment, let alone how they went about their tests while being hunted. Additionally, to my knowledge, all the examples of quote-unquote normal recruitment that we have extended information on only ever involved filling one vacant spot. So it's also uncertain on whether the Nine would even recruit more than one person from the same place or pool of candidates. Anyway, finally. While I do not have a ton of examples to give, when I can, I will mention the type of test the given Slaughterhouse 9 member liked to give. Okay, that's cool. Tab. Oh gosh. King was the original leader of the Slaughterhouse 9, and since there was only ever one leader besides him, what the heck? Can we not? Oh, okay, cool. Besides him, before was the original leader of the Slaughterhouse 9, and since there was only ever one under besides him, before I elaborate on his powers, I'll begin and state that under him the 9 were described more as a quote-unquote brute squad. I don't exactly know what that means, but I can only infer that in that era, the 9 probably had a bigger emphasis on collateral damage, plain murder, and in-your-face confrontations with heroes. To put it another way, at this point they probably already had the reputation of a group. At this point they probably already had the reputation. Wait, that's not right. To put it another way, at this point they probably already had a reputation. They probably already had their reputation as to put it another way, at this point they probably already had their reputation as a group to put it another way, at this point they probably already had their reputation of being that doesn't sound right. They probably put it another way. At this point they probably already had their reputation they probably already had their to put it another way. At this point they probably to put it another way, at this point they probably oh gosh. Oh no. To put it another way, at this point they probably were already known as well, at this point they probably were already known as a group. To put it another way, at this point they probably were already known as a group of powered serial killers that, while formidable, were only just that. Wherever they went, they likely were labeled a high-risk threat, but perhaps not an S-class one yet, besides maybe Grey Boy. I also assume that they did not quite have this. I also assume they did not quite have the same presence and weight to their existence compared to how they later were under Jack Slash. Don't get me wrong, they were still a scary group to encounter, given the capes they had. But to me, since they could be quickly and simply described as a brute squad, that gave me the impression of them not being much other than that in the grand scheme of things. That said, that said, under Jack, they were still a group of powered serial killers, though perhaps more psychotic and deranged. They also, more or less, probably did do much of the same activities. However, with Jack, there came a distinct shift in methodology, in presentation, in public perception. From what I was able to surmise, through Jack, what they did had a sicker and more twisted spin. Through Jack, things became much more like some sort of play or game. Through Jack, the Solarstein were not just another scary group in Worm. No, they became something to be dreaded, something that even those other quote-unquote scary groups feared, or at the very least took serious pause at. On that note, it's quite funny. On that note, it's quite funny. I don't need actually in this part. On that note, it's quite funny. This section is supposed to be about King, yet I've talked quite a bit more about Jack Slash so far. The thing about that is, well, Jack did overshadow King in the end. The latter may have started it all, but Jack was the one that made the Nine what it came to be known as. Though it does help that Jack was the leader far longer than King ever was. Anyway, I don't want this. Actually, can I divide some of these paragraphs? That's fine. I think this is fine. Second, finally. Yeah, I'm fine with those. Okay. No, anyway, I got more than a little sidetracked. So, King. He was a brute and a striker, though the nature of the latter also made him sort of a master too, but not really. More on that in a bit. Right. I'll begin with the brute details since there really isn't much to say. Basically, he had enhanced strength and durability. As far as I know, there isn't much, if any, information relating to the extent in which he was enhanced. From an in-universe perspective, that makes a degree of sense, considering when people think of King, they think of his striker power, which in itself sort of masked any enhanced durability he had. More so, King himself was previously a star athlete, so depending on how enhanced his strength was, it is more than possible for his athletic feats to be explained away through him being abnormally strong, but not quite superhuman strong. Well, that's all on that. Well, that's all for those powers. Well, that's all for those powers, so moving on. King's striker power allowed him to transfer any physical wounds he sustained to people. King's striker power allowed him to transfer any physical wounds he sustained to people he touched within the last 24 hours. Said power worked instantly. A simple pat was all it took to be Said power worked instantly. Said power worked instantly, presumably. A simple path was all it took to be put under it. Additionally, anyone affected by his power also instantly knew that something was done to them. Additionally, anyone affected by his power also instantly knew that something was done to them. The transfer of the wounds themselves were also a conscious one, though King himself did not necessarily need to actively will his wounds away every time. His power was reflective in nature too. So as far as I could tell, as long as he himself or his body were aware of a physical wound, said wound would be shunted away. Now, before I continue on to ways one could have theoretically fought him, there are several other details I want to highlight. First, I could not find a limit on how many victims, or pawns as he liked to call them, he could be linked to. Second, now that you know what his power was, you can see what I meant by King relying on his power to recruit, and how that could classify him as a pseudo-master. Third, I will clarify that King's power more specifically transfers away physical harm. So it is a little unclear what, aside from more obvious bodily injuries, counts as harm. Grey Boy's time looping counted as harm. Grey Boy's time looping registered as harm, making King immune. But that doesn't really help in determining if things like fatigue or sickness count. Maybe not. Maybe yes, maybe no. There are arguments for both, but you can decide for yourself. Maybe yes, maybe no. There are arguments for both, but you can decide for yourself. Finally, I am uncertain on the nature of the transfer, as in, it's unclear to me. It's unclear to me if the full brunt of the damage was sent to one person at a time, or if the damage was dispersed between all his available pawns. Well. When it comes to ways to fight him, or more specifically kill him in the case of the following, they are all relatively straightforward, all things considered. The most brute force method, with little regard for life, was just to wound him over and over until he runs out of pawns. Though if you are one of said pawns and or care about the lives of said pawn / yourself, another method that could bypass his power involves killing him in his sleep, with the caveat that he needed to be in a deep sleep, REM sleep. Otherwise, his body was still aware enough to reactively transfer damage dealt to him. Additionally, even if the latter condition was met, the kill needed to be quick because, as one can imagine, it won't take much time for King and his body to be sufficiently aware again. The next method would be the destruction of the Corona Pollentia. Now, given King's power, for the latter to feasibly work, those involved would likely need a degree of precision and timing that may fall into superhuman territory. Okay, the next two methods one could consider rely more on parahuman powers, at least more than the previous one could theoretically need. Anyway, this first method This first method that could probably work if something or someone is involves this first method that could probably work involves something or someone that cancels out powers. I say probably mainly because I am unsure if such a thing falls under what King's power considered as physical harm. After all, Skitter's power had a wide range in what it considered as a bug, more so in a more meta way. Well, I can see a shard. More so in a more meta way. I can see a shard, especially King's, exerting something like power causing as a sort of physical harm. But I can more so in a more meta way, I can see a shard, especially King's, interpreting something like power canceling or suppression as a sort of physical harm. But I can also concede that it probably would. But I can also concede. Interpreting something like power canceling or suppression as a sort of quote unquote physical harm. But I can also concede that it may not either. Nevertheless, while I did not find evidence of this way, no. Oh wait, why is that there? That doesn't work. There we go. Nevertheless, while I did not find evidence of this way not working, I also didn't find anything about this way working either. So take all that as you will. Regardless of the other method needing needing parahumans involves powers that, how do I say this, manipulate the fabric of reality and or dimensions. I suppose. I know Foil's power worked, and I think Scrub's power would too, given the nature of it. I would also say maybe Clockblockers, but that one I am much more unsure about. Now, actually, why don't I just combine these two? And then put this like that. But that one I am more unsure about. For a variety of but in this, I'm more sure for a variety of reasons, but in this. But that one I am more unsure about. For a variety of reasons, but in this. For a variety of reasons, but. But that one I am more unsure about. For a variety of reasons. But in this moment, the most prominent reason is that I simply But in this moment, the most prominent reasons. But in this one, the most prominent reason is that I simply don't recall enough about. That I simply don't recall enough about the mechanics of his power. Now, the last method technically does not need parahuman assistance. The last method technically does not need parahuman. This technically does not need parahuman assistance. Said method is to use containment foam. It has been shown that the latter does soundly immobilize him. In that same vein of thought, theoretically, it may also be possible to trap him with more normal means and or methods. One that comes to mind is using immense weight, such as dropping a building on him. One Theoretically, it may also be possible to trap him with more normal materials and or methods. One that comes to mind is using immense weight, such as dropping a building on him. That may not harm him. But it may trap him. However, as I said earlier, we don't know how enhanced his strength was, so I can't really make definite guesses on what and the materials could be used or how much weight it would take to pin him. Plus, if it is crushing weight, that will harm the pawns, assuming one cares about them in the first place. Plus, if it is crushing weight, that will harm the pawns, assuming one cares about them in the first place. But besides all that, containment foam was specifically designed by Dragon to quote-unquote contain all but the strongest and fastest villains. So it's not the best frame of reference to go off when it comes to finding Muggle. And trap him. So it's not the best. From a reference to go off when it comes to finding more normal ways to trap him. Oh my gosh, we're back. Okay, whatever. Before I move on to the next member, I'll state that King's setup counters. Before I move on to the next member, I'll say that King's setup counters are more difficult to enact. Not because they are necessarily the most difficult to do, but because King, and more generally the leader of the Solaris 9, is often likely to be with other members of the 9. Generally, out of all the members, the leader would be the one less likely. Generally, out of all members, the leader would be the one less likely to act alone. No, from what little I could piece together about this. No, from what I could piece. Oh. No, from what I could piece together from his death, King didn't have other allies with him at the time. Granted, he probably thought the people who killed him were his allies. Before they weren't. 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 probably thought the people who killed him were his allies before they, well, weren't. That, or he was confident he could take them on. That, or he was just that, or he was confident he could take that, or he was confident he could take them on. So yeah. Oh god, I need to do something. I'll be back. Oh god, my foot. Oh no, my foot. Okay, anyway. Well, that took longer than I thought it would, but on to Screamer. They were a shaker and a stranger, and the power they had was the ability to produce sounds. Producible sounds, excuse me. Producible sounds can be as loud as a scream, evidently, but also as quiet as a whisper, and everything in between. Said sounds could also be projected in around a mile radius, or I guess around a kilometer and a half. In terms of what those sounds felt like, they were described as if the sounds were right next to the recipient. Okay, with, with quick basics out of the way, let's move. Okay, with quick basics out of the way, let's move on to more. Let's move on to the comparatively deeper details. Hmm. Okay, whatever. First, besides their more overt and perhaps more well-known method of deafening people through screams, Skimmer was more than capable of enacting tactics subtler in nature, such as engaging in psychological warfare, exerting mental pressure upon their enemies through auditory distractions, among other things. While on that knock knock, while on that thought, I will mention that I do not know the full extent of what sound she could use. I will mention that I do not know. I will mention that I do not know the full extent of what sound she could utilize. However, from a purely personal perspective, I assume her capabilities were akin to birds that mimicked sound. I say that because Skimmer was capable of modifying their bass voice. I said that because Skimmer could modify their bass voice to the extent that they could outright emulate the voices of others, which, as one can imagine, allowed them an additional avenue. Or at least akin to birds that mimic sound. And because Skimmer could modify, I say that because Skimmer could modify their bass voice to the extent that they could outright emulate the voices of others, which, as one can imagine, allowed them an additional avenue to disorient people's minds. Granted, people, besides their presumably base requirement of actually knowing what their chosen person sounded like, if Skimmer had any chance of sowing any real discord and confusion within their foes, to pull off a convincing performance, they also seemed to have needed a degree of understanding, or at least general knowledge of, on how the person they were mimicking emotionally responded to things. Additionally, while I am uncertain about its validity, it did also seem like knowledge on how a target emotionally responded helped speed up the time it took Schemer to mimic their voice convincingly. It also seemed like knowledge on how a target emotionally responded helped speed up the time it took Schemer to mimic their voice convincingly. Now, even with a convincing act, there were still several ways the mimic person themselves could signal that they were being impersonated. So, how does Skimmer get around that issue? Well, the answer to that leads to another way they use their power. However, before I get around to that, I'll clarify that Skimmer's power did extend beyond producing sounds, as you may have already figured out. As you may have already figured out, it is more accurate to describe their ability as sound manipulation. With that in mind, Skimmer could cut off verbal signaling by oh no, I need to change this. Great. However, as you may have already figured out, it is more accurate to describe their ability as sound manipulation. With that in mind, Skimmer could cut off verbal signaling by putting people on mute in a manner of speaking. Basically, they dampened They basically dampened someone to the point that the point that even shouting was as they basically dampened someone to the point that even shouting was as quiet as barely a whisper. Okay, next one. Okay, this next one, I would say, is less specific way. Oh gosh, did I? Okay. So it's going to use the power and more an aspect of said power. What am I even doing with this? Details? Two things I can elaborate on. Okay, whatever. Okay, with quick basics out of the way, let's move on. Okay, with quick basics out of the way, let's move on. Okay, this next one I would say is okay. Okay. Up to this point, a sensible assumption one could make to counter a screamer is to block out the sounds. Is obviously one could make to counter screamer is to block out the sounds in some way. The issue with that was how Skimmer did not circularly need air vibrations to transmit sounds. It has been noted that, if need be, Skimmer could use the vibrations of someone's bones to generate words. Additionally, Skimmer could Additionally, Skimmer could also trans. And I guess to make matters worse, I suppose to make matters worse. I wonder. Okay. Though I will mention that the latter may. Note. No, Screamer could also transmit sounds in a way that felt like said sounds were in your head. Now, Skimmer could also transmit sounds in a way that felt like said sounds were in your head. Though I will mention that the latter may just be another way to describe what Skimmer's. Though I will mention that the latter may just be another. Though I will mention that the latter may just be another way to. No, I will mention that the latter may just be another way to describe a sound, quote unquote, right next to you. After all, no, I will mention that the latter may just be another way to describe a sound. No, it's been another way to describe. Though I will mention that the latter may just be another way to describe a sound being quote unquote right next to you. After all, the latter can mean a lot of things. Plus with that information that could. After all, the latter can mean a lot of things. No, I will mention that the latter may just be another way to describe a sound being quote unquote right next to you. After all, the latter can mean a lot of things. In terms of what that. After all, the latter can mean a few other things. After all, the latter can mean a few other things. As far as. as far as how close is right next to you. After all, the latter can mean a few other things as far as how close is in terms of and after all, the latter can mean a few other things as far as how close right next to. After all, the latter can mean a few other things as far as how close, as far as how close quote unquote right next to actually is. That right? Now, screamer could also translate sounds in a way that felt like said sounds were in your head. Though I will mention that the latter may just be another way to describe a sound being quote unquote right next to you. After all, the latter can mean a few other things as far as how close right. I mean a few. After all. After all, how close. After all, how close is something right next to you when you think about it? After all, how close is something quote unquote right next to you when you think about it? And how close does one need to be for a voice or a sound to feel like it is in your head? Okay. Wait, just refer back to. Which, to refer back to something I said earlier, with the information that Screamer could potentially use ear bones to form sounds, it's not difficult to imagine Scream. Hmm. Which, to refer back to something I said earlier, with information that Skimmer could potentially use earbones to form sounds, it's not difficult to imagine Skimmer doing voice. It's not difficult to imagine Skimmer generating a voice that did feel so close that. Which, to refer back to something I said earlier, with the information that Skimmer could potentially use earbones to form sounds, it's not difficult to imagine Skimmer generating a voice that did feel so close that it. Which, to refer back to something I said earlier, with the information that Skimmer could potentially use earbones to form sounds, it's not difficult to imagine how Skimmer could generate a voice or sound that felt so close that it. Oh, that sounds so wrong. I hate it. I hate it. Something about that line. I hate it. But who knows? Okay, whatever. Which, to refer back to something I said earlier, with information that Skimmer could potentially use earbones to form sounds, it's not difficult to imagine how Skimmer could generate. could generate a voice or sound that felt so close that it. It's undependent on how Screamer could generate a voice or sound. I don't like it. Oh my gosh, oh my goodness. It's so dumb. I hate it. Mild headache. Which, to refer back to something I said earlier, with the information that Screamer could potentially use earbones to form sounds, it's not difficult to imagine how Screamer could generate a voice or sound so close that. Fuck. The Screamer could potentially use earbones. It's not difficult. It's not difficult to imagine. Or back to something I said earlier. With the information that Screamer could potentially use earbones to form sounds, it's not difficult to imagine how Screamer generated. It's not difficult to imagine how Screamer generated a voice or sound that was close enough to feel as if it. It's not difficult to imagine how Screamer generated a voice or sound that was close enough to feel as if. It's not difficult to conclude how Screamer may have generated. It's not difficult. It's not difficult to conclude how Scammer may have generated sound that felt like they were in your head. Oh, okay, that's fine, I guess. I don't know if that's perfect, but you know, I can accept that. Oh my gosh, this is only up to Screamer, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 7 more. It's gonna be a long video, which is fine, I guess. But, and theoretically, when it comes to the later videos, I haven't looked at the later lineups, but it probably will be a bit easier. I don't have to do as much later because there's some characters I just don't have to talk about again. I can just refer back to a different video, but that's not a lot. Like, I don't really have to talk about Jack Slash, well, actually, anymore. I guess basically just him and other people, but that's later, I guess. Ugh, how annoying. I suppose it goes without saying, but Skimmer does have the capability to fulfill more support. This have the capability. This does have the capabilities to fulfill. Skimmer does have the capability. But Skimmer does have the capabilities to fulfill a more support-oriented role. The thought may have already been ruminating in your head, but yes, Skimmer can and did use their ability for the purpose of communication. Sure, a mile/kilometer.5 isn't that big of a range, but having a method to convey information that was harder to intercept was still nevertheless useful. Plus, to add on to that, Skimmer themselves did not need to worry. Plus, to add on to that, Skimmer themselves did not need to worry too much about being overheard because they could whisper the information they were conveying. Then, if need be, have said information be heard at normal volume on the other side. Anyway. Oh, and I'll also. And I'll also add that Skimmer did seem able to initiate. And I'll also add that Skimmer did seem able to initiate. Skimmer did seem able to initiate two-way communication. However, I will once again note that this may not have been the norm due to circumstances I won't get into, but suffice to say, they may have had help from others of a similar power set. What the heck? Why is it like that? Why would you? Well, that's weird. I didn't realize it would be like that. Wait, can I do that? Oh no, that's such a weird spacing. Clever. Also, that may not have been norm due to circumstances. I won't get into due to circumstances that I won't get into. But suffice to say, they may have had help from others of a similar power set. Conversely, I also may have misinterpreted exactly what was happening in the scene I'm referring to. Said scene is in Sting 26.6, in case you were curious. Curious, that's a better word. Curious. Right. The last thing I wanted to note related to all this was how precise Skimmer could be with their power. And based on all the scenes I have read, Skimmer could, as one can imagine, project their voice in a wide area for all to hear. But alternatively, they were also more than capable of manipulating sounds in a more specific area, localizing the effects to the point where they could target specific individuals. However, I will also once again note that this may not have been the norm due to Oh, wait, I just read that. Am I an idiot? Oh, yes, but whatever. Now, before I move on to the next member, I'll make it clear. I'll I'll make note. I'll make note of it here that information relating to members long dead by the time of the main star may not be fully accurate, or more specifically, true to form to what said relevant members may have been capable of when they were part of the Slaughterhouse 9. I realize that I really should do away with the pretense of avoiding spoilers given the way I like to structure these videos and the nature of the videos themselves, but once again, the voice spoilers. I will state that at some point copies of 9 members are to minimize spoilers. I will state that at some point copies of 9 members are created. However, to varying extents, the personalities, capabilities, and general ways said copies acted in combat were influenced by speculation, hearsay, and stories about them. And more so, more so. More so, said copies have been over to Grings and press copies in ways said copies were influenced by speculation, hearsay, and stories about them. More so, said copies have been described as having incomplete memories along with Said copies have been described as having incomplete memories along with patchwork personalities and personal histories. Okay, to focus back on capabilities specifically, I think it is pertinent to mention that the relevant copied Slaughterhouse members may have been weaker compared to their original selves. There isn't much direct information to support that statement, but given all the other things I have noted, there is a basis in the notion that the copied members did not have the same level of experience and knowledge about their powers compared to their original selves. So, from now on, whenever you see whatever I end up choosing to denote members whose information is mostly based on the copy, keep in mind that said members may have been more formidable originally, or alternatively, there may have been details about their powers that said members took to their graves. For example, this will be later in the video, but Harbinger's section would probably be quite different if we did not have an interlude from their perspective, especially considering the next best sources we have are descriptions on gosh, why is it so bad? I hate it. Okay. This will be later in the video, but Harbinger section would probably be quite different if we did not have an interlude. Especially considering the next best sort is we. Okay then. Showing the next best source we have in regards to what their power parameters could be. Especially considering the next best sources we have in regards to what their powers. A script for a video about the Slaughterhouse 9, which I have no idea when will be finished, because somehow because there's a lot of members to go through and there's a lot more information than I expected there to be, because I'm only now basically finishing up Screamer and there's still 7 people to go. And based on my notes, there's a lot on Harbinger, there's quite a bit on Breed, there's quite a bit on Crimson and Grey Boy. And I guess there's not too much about Nyx or Psychosoma, so I guess whenever, that's some reprieve. And then there's quite a bit on Jack. But it helps that Jack's power is relatively simple, I guess, in terms of notes. Like, there's a lot of stuff I need to talk about Grey Boy, and that's going to be a nightmare to organize into a section. And Crimson, I guess when I really look at Crimson, I just have really large-ish handwriting, so Crimson's isn't that bad. But yeah, Harbinger's is going to be pretty bad. It's like 2 pages, sort of, up for Harbinger. And then Breed, I don't know. I guess Breed should be simple, but I don't know how I'll organize his part, because his power's a bit odd. Not odd, but it's something. Anyway, because right now I'm just talking about how a lot of the information we do have about Slaughterhouse 9 members are, there's a lot, but at the same time, perhaps they're not the best, what's the word? But perhaps what we knew about them are not the best representation of how they actually were, if that makes any sense, as this last paragraph I'm working on is. Anyway, for example, this will be later in the video, but Harbinger section would probably be quite different if we did not have an interlude from their perspective. Especially considering the next best sources we would have in regards to what their powers could be, our descriptions. The next best source we have in regards to, I guess it's not saying them through their best lines, it's another way to say it. Because as I say over here, you know, if you've read the story without saying too much, the copies were like, here it is, to varying extents based on how the copies acted and how and the capabilities of their powers and how they acted were in some part influenced by what other people speculated their powers to be, hearsay about their powers, and stories about them. And I don't know if I'll mention this later, but like for like another example of this would be Grey Boy, because Grey Boy in life didn't know how to work a computer, but when Grey Boy was cloned, let's just say, yeah, cloned, but I'll call them copies. When Grey Boy was like, bleh, when Grey Boy was copied, Bonesaw put into his memories, yeah, Bonesaw made it so Grey Boy could be pretty decent with computers and know how to operate computers, when the original Grey Boy didn't know how to operate computers. So that's one example, I guess. Well, I mean, that's the most prominent example off the top of my head. I mean, I guess another example would be Harbinger also, because when protagonist people were fighting a bunch of Harbinger clones, Harbinger himself, you know, older Harbinger, well, when they were fighting younger Harbingers, older Harbinger noted how when he was that age, or whatever, yeah, when he was at that point in his life, he wasn't that sloppy, because apparently the Harbinger clones were a bit more aggressive and like sloppy in how they fought. That's what I that's what I think, because from when I was reading from, because sure, I use, you know, the wiki as like a basis, and then I tend to like look into the actual sources, and I guess based on what I was able to find, that seemed to be the case from what I can say. Like, in general, what we see the clones are capable of probably are more or less what they were capable of in life, but with like an asterisk of maybe not quite. Maybe like there's this potential that they, in some ways, like here I mentioned how they may have been stronger in life, but I don't know, actually really know, because it's hard to really grasp, because there's only small hints here and there, like Screamer. Wait, maybe not Screamer. Because even the PRT at the time, way back when, you know, they couldn't like sit down with the Slaughterhouse 9 members of the past, right, for obvious reasons, and say, hey, Screamer, how does your power actually work? And what are the exact parameters of your power? And yeah. Like same with Breed, I guess, when I get to Breed, right? Well, no, Breed's a bit, it's also another weird thing where when I first made these videos, I was a bit on the fence if I should take information spoken by the author outside of the story. Because on one hand, I like adding information that's just solely in the story, but on the other hand, because, you know, I'm partially in the camp of, if the information isn't in the story, then I shouldn't really take it into account or say, because you could say things like that. Oh, why couldn't so and so do this? But if you respond and say, well, the author of the story said in some other outside Reddit post that they couldn't do that because their range was actually so and so. Well, in the story, nowhere in the story to say that their range of their abilities was like that. So as far as the reader knows, without any other outside influence, that's just the way it is, and there's no real explanation why certain characters may have not done this at this point. Especially since there are moments where we do get specific things, sort of. Like, we have a ballpark sort of estimate on what Skitter's range, for example, was when it came to her bugs. And other vague, like, descriptions on other powers, but, like, you know, but yeah. But then at some point, I think mainly because I thought it was more fun, I would go like, well, I'll add outside of story information too, plus like some outside speculation I found. I think so. Oh gosh, let me look at my notes because it's right in front of me. I think it was several blocks, but I don't think it was. Well, that's another thing though. When you say 4 blocks, like, what does 4 blocks even translate to? Because I don't think there's like, because Sister Sword takes place in the U.S. I don't think there's an average number that 1 block actually equals to. I think, as far as I know, I think there's like an average of 1 block means, but what does 1 block actually translate to? It's kind of like when you say 1 cup. And sure, measure of volume, all that jazz, but it's probably better to do measure by weight or whatever. Where are you, Skidder? It's been. It's kind of funny looking at old notes because I was less into that. I mean, I made note of that too when I made my Undersiders video, but I think that's trigger events. That's second triggers. Yeah, the US is weird from all I've read about. Funny that I say that. That's the... Wait, where's my... How am I not finding... It's just like... Oh, here it is. That's the Endbringers... Oh, here it is. Where the heck? Did I just not take notes about these people very well? Which is... Yeah. There isn't... Wow, my notes were so sparse back then. Oh my goodness. Yeah, did I seriously just... Where did my data... Where did I put these notes then? There's like no notes here. And yet I managed to make like 2 videos. What the heck? Where's my skittles? Is it in a different notebook? Actually, what am I doing? Can I just do this? Not here. Let me open up another Word doc. Actually, that's not working. Oh no, you got behind the scenes stuff. Oh no. Oh whoa. Where is it? Video assets, scripts. Where are you? Undersider. Where's part 1? Undersiders. That's part, or is that version 2? Yeah. Okay. Where's my scripts? I have no idea where all these went. Empire, Manton, PRT, trigger events, extra details. Oh, I didn't realize I was missing something. Oh gosh, why do I have part 2 but not part 1? The heck? Archers, Empire, Kill Kiss, Manton, Palanquin, Protectorate, Triumvirate, Undersiders, trigger events. What? How do I misplace this? Video files? No. That's a weird thing to lose. Space whales, wow. Oh god, all this stuff that... this probably would have been a nightmare if I did videos the same way I do now. Maybe, not sure. Relationships, blah blah blah. This doesn't tell me anything. Ask Skidder. Abilities and powers, double trigger, control. So weird. Blah blah. Oh, range. Yeah, 3 to 4 city blocks. With a block being 300 feet. Where was that? Oh. Oops. But yeah, like I said, when I made those old videos. I guess I suppose I didn't go as into this sort of thing, so I think like, because in this case he says his boss being 300 feet, so what? Okay. Well, I guess that's interesting. I'm not gonna redo those videos. I can't be bothered. But you know, those videos exist as a time capsule of when I was, I guess, less in depth with videos. I guess, I don't know. If my notes have certainly changed. Anyway, let me actually finish this. Blah blah blah. Especially considering the next sources we have in regards to what their power parameters could be are descriptions on how Harbinger's younger copies fought, anything the older Harbinger chose to share, and whatever speculation the Disparity had on Harbinger. Conversely, you can also state that things would have been different if we had an interlude from King's or Skimmer's perspective, or I guess any other past dead member. It's gonna bother me. Where's my other notebook? Did I find a different notebook? This one? More research? This is just me messing around with art. Well, there's... Huh. Okay, well, this is some of my ideas for logos. Okay. No, I will say... Oh my goodness. I will say, though, whenever I end up getting this script done, which is... who knows? It's probably going to be pretty fun to... Okay, anyway. It's gonna be fun when I end up trying to make logos. Because logos are also, I don't know. There's a lot of parts in the video making process that I don't like, sort of. Mostly just recording audio. But probably the funnest part is trying to make logos for everyone. Because yeah, especially because, you know, the ones that end up going in the videos might not end up being what they finally end up being. Oh god, what am I talking about? I can't speak. That was such a word salad. Especially since even the logos that you see when in the videos themselves may not even be the logo I end up determining to be the final version of said logo. Like, some logos like turn out perfectly great and I love it. Like, I just do it well on the first try. But, you know, Tattletale's logo would be a good example. The first logo of that was, like, horrible. But, you know, it is what it is. And now that I think about it, that's actually bothering me. Where's these old... How am I missing one? How do I have part 2? That's actually bothering me too much. Blah 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 blah. Guru Regent. Wow, this. Wow, what the heck? This is such a weird script. It almost makes me want to redo the video, but then I'm like, probably not. Depends. Like, if I could actually see what my initial video was, that might help, but whatever. Conversely, you can also say that things would have been different if we hadn't. Conversely, you can also state that the other sections would have been different if we had an interlude from King's or Skimmer's perspective, or I guess any other past dead member. Well, oh my goodness. Actually, now that I think about it, let me check something. I don't know if this is applicable, but let me check on something. So I'll probably just do this for another like half hour. Maybe I'll start this next section finally. which is gonna be Harbinger. Oh goodness me. Well, okay. Man, where's my old laptop? Maybe I have to look in my old laptop. Maybe that's where the file ends up being. Let's see, personal worm maybe? Oh, I guess it is in a Word doc. Why? I mean, I guess in some ways it's potentially more recoverable. I mean, yeah, sure, but like, as it turns out, I mean, I feel like it's evident if you've seen any of my videos, at least past a certain point. Like, obviously, as I've stated a few times, my older videos are a bit less, a bit iffy, I would agree. And while I say I won't redo them, I may not. I may still redo them. Probably not, though, because I don't like going back to stuff I already did. Even if past things could have been better, but I think they work well enough. At least at the time. Like, at the time, those videos, when I sent those out, they were what I wanted them to be for the most part. But perhaps not the way I would want them to be now, the way I do videos now. Even though the general quality of the videos, I would say, hasn't really changed that much, all things considered. Which is fine by me, I guess, but, you know. Because I guess when looking at my notes, when I talk about Harbinger, I'm not simply saying he can see the numbers of the world. It's just one part of what his section will be about. Because there's a lot of other things I can elaborate upon and talk about that are relevant, or I guess interesting to know about him. He's not good to say, you know, Skitter has bug powers, but you know, there's a lot of other interesting stuff Skitter did with her bug powers, obviously. You know, their little bug clones, you know, speaking through them. I think sort of kinds of seeing through them, you know. And there's other fun things too, how while Harbinger is pretty good close up, he works better from a range or from like a third party perspective, if that makes any sense, you know. Not exactly Puppet Master, but you know, when he's not in the thick of things, his power works a bit better, I guess. But there's other weird things too, like he's really good at moving fast. Not quite a mover, but I would, you know, like where is it, climbing buildings as fast as if he was on the horizontal ground. Like he's just that good at his power, just that good at informing him of like super tiny ledges or whatever and whatnot, and showing him. I would assume like the most efficient path and whatnot. And how even though he's presumably, from all I was able to gather, even though he's not like enhanced in any real way physically in terms of like durability or strength, his powers, well, maybe not just his powers, but you know, it probably helped in melee combat. You know, once again, he's not the best in melee combat. He works better at range, but if he was in melee combat range, his power, from the looks of it, helped him, you know, leverage, instead of, you know, being a fight between strength, you know, the leverage thing. Like he was able to like pretty, where is it? Like Lung, like he fought Lung once, you know, and he was able to put Lung in like a lock, in the body lock or whatever it's called, a hold, yeah, a hold, where Lung couldn't leverage his strength. But obviously, you know, long enough, and Lung probably would get to the point where even like a hold where he couldn't gather his strength he wouldn't be able to do, because you know Lung would just get too big, you know, among other things. But yeah, that's interesting. I don't know why. I should wait a minute. Do I have my Endbringer stuff here too? I don't. My Endbringer scripts aren't here too. But I guess I'll grab them from my Google Doc whenever I feel like it. Yes. For some reason, they were in my Google Doc. And, amazingly enough, I'm looking at this and I can't believe this. Oh man, these descriptions are actually extremely short. However, she developed a secondary benefit. She has military capabilities. The point emotions and it's like perceiving. Yeah, I was very like succinct about things, which I guess is good, I suppose. But like, I makes me wonder how I would make these videos again nowadays, as I've said way too many times already in the past 10 or so minutes. Oh gosh. Whenever I get these Slaughterhouse 9 videos done, maybe I will do just that, just for fun. Have a throwback. Even though it's not that much of a throwback, it's only a few years ago at this point. Because I'm looking at these old scripts, I'm like, man, this is not how I would do things at all. Like, for how many? Because we have a lot of like, well, maybe not. I don't know my thought process back then. I guess it's hard to think about how I thought back then. But just looking at this first script for part one, like, all these members are essentially what, one paragraph. Skitter had barely a paragraph. Same with Tattletale and Gru and Regent. Like, ugh. That's well, whatever. I need to do the Slaughterhouse 9 members first, and this is gonna be like, how many videos? This is gonna be like at least 4 videos, which is fun, I guess. It will be, but scripts. Anyway, I'll get those scripts back a bit later. Let me actually at least get Harbinger's part done. Well then. Well, I guess any other path. Conversely, you can also say that other sections would have been different. Conversely, you can also state that other sections would have been different if we had an interlude from King's or Skimmer's perspective, or I guess any other past dead member. Well. Right. Important bit of information. With that important bit of information done, let's move on to Harbinger. Let's move on. onto. With that important bit of information done, let's move on to Harbinger. 20 more minutes. Okay. How do I want to do this? Oh gosh, there's so much stuff to take into consideration. Especially since my notes aren't. They could be neater, but it. After what the heck is my handwriting? Pausing and concentrating. All right, with that important bit of information done, let's move on to Harbinger. Alright, with that important bit of information done, let's move on to Harbinger. He was a thinker. And to the wider general look, and as far Right, with that important bit of information done, let's move on to Harbinger. He was a thinker, and to the wider general, and to the general public, and as far as the PRT could, his power gave him of space. His power gave him hyper awareness of space and of the movement of his body. With that important bit of information done, let's move on to Harbinger. He was a thinker, and to the general public, and as far as the PRT could put together, his power gave him hyper awareness of space and of and as far as the PRT could put together, his power gave him hyper awareness of space and of the movement of his body. Does that sound right? With that important, let's move on to Harbinger. He was a thinker, and to the general public, and as far as the PRT could put together, he was a thinker, and to the general public, and as far as the PRT could put together, his power that doesn't sound right. He was a thinker, and to the general he was a thinker. He was a thinker, and to the general public, and as far as the pretty it's probably this part. He was a thinker, and to the general public, and as far as the PRT. That's not right. With that important bit of information done, let's move on to Harbinger. He was a thinker, and to the general public. He was a thinker, and to the general public, and he was a thinker. And to the PRT, his power gave him hyper awareness of space and of the movement of his body. At least, okay, maybe not. Don't add the general public part. He was a thinker. And to the PRT, he was a thinker. And to the PRT, as far as they knew, what the heck is with my spelling right now? Okay, I was right the first time. He was a thinker, and to the PRT, his power gave him a hyper awareness of space and of his own he was a thinker, and to the PRT, his power. Oh, and as far as the PRT knew, he was a thinker, and as far as the PRT could tell, his power gave him. Okay, that doesn't sound right. He was a thinker, and as far as the PRT could tell, his power gave him a hyper awareness of space and of his own body. Now, that was not. That was not. Now, that was not his actual power. At least not in the way the PRT may have thought it was. Wait, that's the right. The important bit different then. Let's move on to Harbinger. He was a thinker, and as far as the PRT could tell, his power gave him a hyper awareness of space and of his own body. Now, that was not his actual power, at least not in the way the PRT may have thought it was. His true. What's wrong? The numbers, the math. The math. Okay, maybe not that. He was a thinker, and as far as the PRT could tell, his power gave him. His power was. Okay. His power was a hyper awareness of space. His power was a hyper awareness of space and of his own body movements. Now, that was not his actual power. Now, that was not his actual power. But given. Oh, I'm using ability and power too much. He was a thinker, and as far as the PRT could tell, his power was a hyper awareness of space and of his own body movements. Now, that was not his actual power, but given. Now, that was not his actual power, but given what his true ability was. Now, that was not his actual power, but given what his true ability was, the PRT made a fairly decent. Now, that was not his actual power, but given what his true ability was, the PRT made a fairly decent guess because while. I don't know. No, that was not his actual power, but given what. That was not his actual power. But given what his true ability was, the PRT made a fairly decent guess because while. Okay, I don't want that. I don't want that. That was not his actual power. His theory ability allowed him to see the numbers, the math, that governed the world. However, his theory ability allowed him to see the math, the numbers, the math that governed the world. However, given the information that the PRT was able to realistically acquire at the time, their guess was not a bad one. As you see. Right, with that important bit of information done, let's move on to Harbinger. He was a thinker, and as far as the PRT could tell, his power was a hyper-awareness of space and of his own body movements. Now, that was not his actual power. His true ability allowed him to, quote-unquote, see the numbers, the math, that governed the world. With said math appearing before him, in the air. With said math appearing in front of him in the air. However, I will say, given the information the PRT was, I will say, given the information the PRT was able to realistically acquire at the time, their guess was not a bad one, since as you will see. However, I will say, given the information the PRT was able to realistically acquire at the time, their guess was not a bad one, since as you will see, the nature of Harbinger's power did lend. However, I will say, given the information the PRT was able to realistically acquire at the time, their guess was not a bad one, since as you will see, the nature of Harbinger's power did. Now, that was not space and of his own body. Now, that was not his actual power. His sheer ability allowed him to see, quote-unquote, see the numbers, the math that governed the world, with said math appearing in front of him in the air. However, I will say, given the information the PRT was able to realistically acquire at the time, their guess was not a bad one, since as you will see, the nature of Harbinger's power did allow him his. Oh, I gotta check something. I'll be done in a few minutes, but let me finish this. I mean, I guess I got some done. I mean, I didn't really continue the actual script too much, but I did a lot of revising for all the other parts of the script, which I like well enough, I suppose. But yeah, let me finish this. See, but since as you will see, the nature of Power Sword did allow him an increased awareness with space around. Did give him, in a manner of speaking, give him, in a manner of speaking, an increased awareness and how his body moved space around him, and how his body moved in sets. Did give him, in the matter of speaking, an increased awareness of the space around him and how his body. The nature of Power Sword did give him, in a manner of speaking, an increased awareness of the space around him and how his body moved in said space. Though, evidently, perhaps perhaps not in the way that Pyrrhia may have assumed. Okay, I guess I'm done for today. Maybe I'll do more streaming tomorrow just to get me more motivated to get this script done, because in the moment I like my notes, but when I actually have to put my notes into something, how should I say, that makes more sense in the script, I don't really like doing that. Well, I do like doing that, but the experience isn't the most fun. And you know, you could say make better notes, but I feel like if I did that, the note taking part, the information gathering part of these videos would take a lot longer. And well, you know, I'd rather that time be allotted to script making. You know, I guess, you know, in the end of the day, I'm more okay with being annoyed at past me's notes and trying to navigate through them rather than, you know, trying to make a better note system, because I don't know. That's what I don't know. Because, you know, very spastic, as you may have known. I'm very spastic, but yeah. Well, I'm done. Bye. And you know, it was fun to have a little bit sidetracked and to talk about Worm, at least with one other person, for at least a little bit, before I focus back on the script, however brief. Right.